Welcome to another videos of Francois Ventures into Awakening. Today, we will explore and discuss on the why everything that is alive requires sleep. Sleep has been a very interesting phenomena to me since my accident. If needed, please see my first video to get more details on my accident itself. Before my accident, I simply accepted the need to sleep at face value, like everyone else. That is, I always had to sleep like everyone and never questioned the why do we need to sleep. In my whole 58+ year of life before the accident, the 2 or 3 times that I randomly listened to some kind of documentary on the subject of sleep, I simply believed and trusted what the expert of the documentary that said sleep is for the body to take a rest and replenish, simply because it sounded logical to my ego. Nowadays, sleep is broken into 4 or 5 phases or stages depending on the expert and the terminology used. All these stages or phases depends on the measurements of the brain and body activities and how they are segmented. The essence of today's expert regarding why we need sleep is more detailed than what I remember from the old days but is essentially the same. That is, sleep allows to restore your body and clean out your brain by reprocessing the day events, which allows building memory. I am not claiming that the observations of their measurement are erroneous or wrong, but their theory or hypothesis on the why we sleep is based on their interpretation of what is actually going on in the body and brain. They are just that, theory and hypothesis that no one can really confirm or refute. Since my accident, I know that this assumption about why sleep is required is not categorically true, or at least not the only reasons, and therefore incomplete. Like the experts, what I am going to put forward on the why do we sleep is solely based on my own interpretation of my experiences or observations, and they are just that, theories and hypotheses that no one can really confirm or refute, including myself. You can obviously disagree with my theories and hypotheses and consider them pure speculation, but that is up to you to decide. Please comment below if you have other hypotheses on the subject. As I mentioned in my first video, the very first memory that I had was 2 weeks after my accident, when my consciousness rejoined my body, is the feeling of waking up. The exact same feeling that I had every morning all my life, and I believe like everyone else experience every morning. Immediately after that waking up feeling, I received a flurry of other emotions, but I clearly remember that very first feeling of waking up. Based on my family testimony, during the 2 weeks for which I have no recollection at all, my body was somewhat functional. It had to mend itself and relearn some basic functions like keeping equilibrium, swallowing and more. Otherwise, it seems on autopilot. My body would not engage into a conversation but would answer basic questions when asked. If you do a search on the web, you will find that it has been observed that the brain cannot build memories while bleeding. That explanation sounds reasonable, but the why is that the case is never really explained. As far as I know, memories are not kept in the blood. One documentary about the brain that I have seen explains that for given patient a certain brain area can be activated when a certain memory is recalled, but a few weeks later, for the same patient, another brain area was activated when that same memory is recalled again. In other words, nobody knows exactly how and where memories are kept. I now fervently believe that not everything is materialistic, like modern science believe, and there is no materialistic answer to simple phenomena like why we must sleep, how and where memories are stored, and many more life mysteries. There is this belief in science, to which I adhere most of my life, that we may not currently understand a given phenomena today, but give it time and science will eventually figure it out. That basic belief about science is now kind of erroneous to me because I think that as long science is purely materialistic base, it will not be able to solve many life mysteries. As far as I am concerned, there is undoubtedly a consciousness dimension with which we are all engaged with, and sleep is somehow part of that interaction process. Science will have to eventually acknowledge the existence and our interactions with the consciousness dimension to be able to better describe some life phenomena. I really believe that the brain is some kind of highly complex receiver and controller. The controller part is self-evident since the brain clearly controls all of our bodily functions and actions, and it uses its 5 sensory input senses to allow us navigation in this material world. The controller is the part that is purely materialistic focus and corresponds to the horizontal axis, named ego axis, described in my third video titled Eckhart's Axes. The receiver part is much less tangible and is also mostly ignored by everyone in the population. It is related to the vertical axes named the self in the same video titled Eckhart's axes. This vertical axis represents a second dimension that is part of life, which seems to be an energy and vibration-based dimension. The connection between this energy-based vertical axis and the horizontal materialistic axes is unknown, but the existence of both axes is also undeniable, at least to me. For example, the experts claim that sleep is there to replenish or rejuvenate our body and brain by going through the various sleep cycles. The basic premise is totally true, in the sense that we all have experienced that after a good night of sleep you do feel replenished and rejuvenated in the morning. The incomplete answer is how exactly did we replenish our brain and body? As far as I know, nothing that we currently use in our materialistic world get replenished or rejuvenate by simply slowing down the use of it for a short time, apart from our bodies. Everything that we humans have invented and currently use needs to plug into a wall if it is electrically based, or some chemical needs to be added if it is mechanically based. Either way, something needs to be added in order to replenish something. During sleep, we are not eating or drinking, and yet you get replenished and rejuvenated by simply lowering your body and brain activities. As far as I know, the brain and body are still functioning at a certain level, maybe at a lower rate, but still consuming some energy. That is why the replenishing portion of the expert explanation does not make sense to me. The only way that the replenishing can make sense, and we all know that sleep does replenishes, is if you consider the self-vertical axes or second dimension. I consider that the receiver part of the brain is the actual part that allows us to replenish our living experience during sleep. There are two possibilities how this replenishment can happen. Either the brain and body needs to receive energy directly from the consciousness dimension, or yourself has to be unplugged from the brain because it is a too demanding or intense interface that requires to get temporarily unplugged for a while from the brain and let it resets itself to a default state. In other words, reboot the brain. From my experience, especially from my accident experience, I believe that the later explanation about the self having to unplug from the brain and body is the most probable one. Myself had to wait for my brain to complete its repair before it could reconnect with it. That would explain why I have no recollection of the accident in the following 2 weeks, while my brain was bleeding or at least repairing some severe bruise and somewhat damage. During that time, the receiver part of my brain was no longer functional. In other words, you can view this phenomena as my brain having to do a hard reboot. At least that is my current hypothesis of what happened after my accident and also what take place during sleep. If you have any other ideas or hypothesis about why such a thing happens, please share them in the comments below. A funny analogy that comes to mind for the assumption that the brain need a regular reboot is a running joke on the old sitcom, IT Crowd, regarding computers. In that sitcom, every time somebody called IT support because they were having any type of issues with their computer, the IT support person automatically and always replied to reboot their computer. I think that is what is happening to our brains and body every day. When we get really tired, we can feel that things are not necessarily going as smoothly as they should anymore, so we happily go to sleep to reboot our brain. This last observation kind of match with what the experts say, that sleep is required to rearrange stuffs in the brain or reboot. The difference is that the experts do not give any real reason for how or why this rearrangement happens, they simply interpret their observations that it seems to happen. Here I am agreeing with the experts with the added caveat of proposing the idea that this rearranging or rebooting happens because of the self-vertical axis, which is part of the consciousness dimension. Finally, another facet of sleep that I believe has been pointed out in the past by many people and that I would like to reiterate here, is that sleep can be viewed as a mini-cycle of a life. We all know that we are born and eventually we will all die, and we call that life. The basic question becomes, where is our self located before we are born and after we die? I have seen many videos about the self that mentions the self actually never gets born or die because it is a part of the consciousness dimension, which is a timeless dimension. This last reflection begs the obvious follow-up question, where does our self go when we sleep? I strongly believe that it goes at the exact same place, that is to the consciousness dimension. Each morning, we are all reborn for the day, and each time we go to bed we die for the night, and that is why sleep can be viewed as a mini-cycle of life. I strongly believe that is where myself went for the 2 weeks following my accident, back to the consciousness dimension. Please comment below if you have any opinions on this last remark. Thank you for watching this video until the end. As always, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel if you find this video interesting and would like to see others. See you next time.